today, Chris Tollis, the founder and CEO of Yardstick, is coming on the pod.
Yardstick measures soil carbon, specifically soil organic carbon. SOC is the focus of our measurement technology.
They have a very novel and interesting methodology and technology for measuring soil carbon content.
Trees are super, super important, but soils store way more carbon around the world than all the trees in the world combined. The voluntary carbon marketplace is not sufficient to have the sort of global scale impact that we want in agriculture through soils.
Our conversation today is largely around the importance of soil health, how to improve it, and then how to message your solution.
Our ability to put off to future generations and to current generations in other parts of the world is incredible.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Clean Techies, the podcast, the best podcast for clean tech founders who want to learn from others. I'm Silas Maynor, clean tech headhunter at Earth Tech Talent, and today I will be your host. So today, Chris Tollis, the founder and CEO of Yardstick, is coming on the pod, and they have a very novel and interesting methodology and technology for measuring soil carbon content or soil health, right? And their customers are anyone who is buying soil carbon credits, who needs verification of those of those credits and how good the carbon actually is. Think of Microsoft, etc. And their other customers are in the agriculture space who want to measure the health of their soil to improve the resilience of their supply chains, because some people are realizing that soil health is very important for long-term stability in their supply chains. Think of people like General Mills, which is one of their customers. Our conversation today is largely around the importance of soil health, how to improve it, and then how to message your solution. So we actually spent quite a bit of time on that final part, both from a media perspective, but also from a, how do I market my startup perspective, especially in this kind of anti-climate age, if you will. So I personally really enjoyed this episode, and I hope you will too. As a heads up, we did run into some recording issues, so if you catch any of that, we do apologize and appreciate your patience. All right, enjoy the show. All right, Chris, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
I'm slightly jealous of you being in Spain right now as we're recording this. It's a very nice time to be in Spain, but things are coming on, man. I'm glad we were able to arrange this in such short notice. So let's start off with this. Who is a climate tech OG, or as we like to call them, a clean techie that you would love to have dinner or coffee with?
Yeah, so I saw you were going to pose this question, and I felt a lot of pressure to come up with something like really clever and interesting, and I didn't. But I was reading a story about Germany in the 1930s at the same time. And there's a guy named Haber, who's a very famous German chemist who famously invented many things, some of which are terrible, not to get too heavy, but like namely the precursor to the gas that was used to gas many people to death in World War II. But he's most famous contemporarily for the Haber-Bosch process, which is the chemical kind of chemistry process that's the basis of most contemporary synthetic fertilizer. People use different names for it. I'm not really partial to any one or the other, but everything we do affects climate, and feeding lots of people is incredibly important. Explosion of food productivity over the 20th century has enabled a lot of the things that I love most about being human in the world today. So his legacy is mixed. Many technologies, right, can be used for good or evil. But Homie Haber, for the Haber-Bosch process, we're of course seeing many of the downsides of like over deployment of some of these technologies. But he came up in this other book, and so he's top of mind for me right now.
That's it. That's a very interesting, I guess, just observation that I think it's very difficult sometimes for climate people to reconcile that there is good and bad in different technologies and different people. Like you can never, we're looking at the Trump administration, obviously there's certain things that some people really like and some people really absolutely despise, understandably. So it's like you can never get a perfect person, right? And you can never get a perfect technology either, right? Unfortunately. So, but it's up to us to be good stewards of it, right?
Exactly, and acknowledge that even we contain those two pieces. I think all the truest things in the world are about holding paradox, and this is one of the truest things. Is that we all have influence for good. We all have other kinds of influence to pretend like, especially, I think there's a lot of valorizing of founders in the climate tech sector. We're going to do it. We're going to fix the problem. That's all good. A big part of why I do this job is because I want to get out of bed in the morning and know I'm contributing to something meaningful. I want to look my kid in the eye. And the world is complex. And I think woe to the technologist that sees things through a binary lens of like good and bad.
Yeah, exactly. So also for people who may not be familiar with what you're doing, can you just give us a really quick explanation of what Yardstick is? And then keeping in mind, this could be for somebody who's not necessarily in climate.
Yep, yeah, you bet. So Yardstick measures soil carbon, specifically soil organic carbon. SOC is the focus of our measurement technology. Most people are aware of how trees store carbon from the atmosphere. Photosynthesis takes CO2 from the air and sticks it in woody biomass, trees and leaves and stuff like that. Trees are super, super important, but soils store way, 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 way more carbon around the world than all the trees of the world combined. Actually, more carbon than all of the trees and all of the plants and all of the animals combined. Soils are a massive carbon sink, but it's been pretty invisible because it's literally underground. We can't see almost any of it, and it's been really hard to measure. Famously, what gets measured gets managed, and so the attention that's been put on forests, preserving them, restoring them, super critical. Take that exact same story and just replace forests for soils. Because soils store all this organic carbon, we need to keep it there. We need to reverse the destruction of soil organic carbon stocks that have already occurred. But if we don't have good measurement, how the heck are we going to know what's working? So Yardstick has developed a new way of measuring soil carbon so that we can figure out what's working and do more of what's working and stop doing the stuff that's not working.
Yeah. So I think you may have sort of answered this already, but why is measuring soil carbon important? Just because it has so much impact on the world at large?
Yeah, so beware of false binaries, but I'm going to give you a binary way of thinking about this, which is that you either care about climate change or you don't care about climate change. If you care about climate change, measuring soil carbon is essential for the reason you just described. It's one of the largest stocks in the whole world. We need to keep the stocks where they are. Again, back to forests. We need to restore forests that have been destroyed. We need to grow more forests. We need to preserve forests that already exist. If all you care about is climate, soil organic carbon stocks are essential in the same way. If you don't care about climate, soil organic carbon is important because it is the basis of all food, or 99% of our
Mm.
food, basically, besides fish. And even then, fish and soil agriculture intersect a lot in farmed fisheries. But we eat things that come from the earth. The earth provides our food because of how soil supports crops, and soil organic carbon is simultaneously this very specific climate specialist interest and this incredibly general enabler of all human civilization by way of food. Soil organic carbon is the best indicator of overall soil health. It's essential to all soil function. So these are two enormously overlapping groups of people, but whether you care about climate or don't care about
Yeah.
climate, taking care of soil carbon is super important. That's why measuring it is super important.
So is having more, just for very simple terms, is having more carbon in the soil going to produce more crops usually?
Yeah, I'm not a soil scientist. Neither are you. Not much of our audience is. So, with apologies to the soil scientists in the audience, to oversimplify a little bit, yeah, higher soil organic carbon values generally are better. Soil organic carbon as a concentration is usually the way it's measured, a percentage of mass, you can think of it. Hey, of this, 100 units of soil, what percentage of it is in the form of soil organic carbon, the specific compound? Agricultural soils in the US, like famously our Midwest, the breadbasket of America is an amazing agricultural system. Weak soils could have 0.5 to 1% organic carbon. Amazing soils could have 5, 6%
Mm.
organic carbon. It's not as simple as always as, big number equals good, big number equals food, but
Yeah.
all things equal, higher organic carbon soils are going
Better.
to be more productive, they're going to be more resilient, they're going to use water more efficiently, etc.
Yeah, I'm really tempted to just start asking you questions about agriculture because there's a lot of things I am very passionate about this space because both my parents were raised as farmers, but I think we would completely lose the point of this podcast. So
Well,
we'll
you're the
stop that.
host.
But let me ask you this. So obviously, only climate tech companies that make money continue to succeed. So what is your guys' economic strategy? How do you make money? Where's the economic value that you provide?
Yeah. So we make money from two different sources right now, to oversimplify. One is customers in the voluntary carbon marketplace. That's what most people know Yardstick for, if they know us at all. We'll come back to that. And the second are folks that are measuring soil organic carbon for reasons beyond the voluntary carbon marketplace. So most people in climate that have come across Yardstick think of us as an enabler of high quality soil carbon based credits in the VCM, the voluntary carbon marketplace, offsets, are another way to describe credits. Nature-based solutions in the VCM have had an extremely checkered past. A lot of our work to date has unlikely been actually positive in terms of climate impact. And a key challenge of that is measurement. So soil carbon methodologies, methodology is the word that means sort of the rules of minting credits in the VCM. Soil carbon methodologies are very new. The oldest one that's kind of really seeing market traction is like 4 or 5 years old. So we're just seeing the first soil carbon credits come to market. Yeah. And in order to sell high quality credits based on soil carbon, unsurprisingly, one must measure soil carbon.
Yeah.
So Yardstick is a novel way of doing that measurement. It's called in situ spectroscopy. We can spend more time on the technology itself if you want. But essentially, we're replacing laboratory analysis with a movie. It's an optical technology. And so our customers in that part of our business are hiring us because their business model is to sell credits in the voluntary carbon marketplace. Microsoft has a net zero goal. It's got a beyond net zero goal. They have a carbon buying team. Carbon buying team goes out to the marketplace, says, hey, what are the best products out there? They choose Indigo as a supplier of soil carbon credits. Indigo must hire a service provider, in this case Yardstick, among others, to measure soil carbon aligned to the methodological requirements of the credits that it's producing. That's very straightforward. If you want credits, you got to measure soil carbon. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Easy. The second, and that's super important work. We love that work. Heck yeah. And my view is that the voluntary carbon marketplace is not sufficient to have the sort of global scale impact that we want in agriculture through soils. So this second segment, which is smaller in terms of absolute dollars, but we believe will be more of our long game as a company, is measuring soil carbon for other reasons. And those are varied. Some of our customers are measuring soil carbon within their supply chains because they know the relationship, as I mentioned, between carbon content and resiliency. So for example, Organic Valley is a customer, General Mills is a customer. These companies, they may have net zero goals, but they're largely interested in soil carbon because it helps them understand whether their supply chain will continue to perform. If you're General Mills, you make a lot of money selling Cheerios. Cheerios are made of oats. If because your soils are degraded, you're not producing oats as efficiently with higher costs, oh no, there was a super dry year and yield went down, you got a problem because without oats, no Cheerios, and no Cheerios, no revenue. So any company with an agricultural supply chain is extremely exposed to the risk of unhealthy soils. Soil organic carbon is the single best indicator of healthy soils. That's not a Yardstick opinion. That's like a strongly evidence-based fact within the soil science community. Many other things also characterize soil health, but soil organic carbon is the single best indicator of soil health. So these companies are saying, wow, weather is changing more quickly than we expected. Water is changing more quickly than expected. If I want to continue to sell lots of Cheerios, which I do, that's what I do, it's my whole business, man, I got to get down in my supply chain through all the middle people of my supply chain and start to understand where is risk accumulating in my supply chain. How do I improve the health of my soils so that I can keep selling Cheerios? Because that's my business model.
This is very fascinating. So I just want to make one observation that I've begun to really start to kind of internalize with the best climate tech companies usually have a very it's not necessarily connected to climate tech, at least not directly, or climate solutions, but their technology can solve the climate, a climate problem, but also solve a problem for people like General Mills. And if you think about it, eventually that problem will then be very obviously connected to the climate issues because maybe not necessarily, you could say it's not just climate, it's also about health and sustainability, because I would assume, and maybe you can kind of riff on this a bit, that they're starting to recognize, because we have these methods of understanding and measuring the soil now, the soil health now, people are understanding that maybe certain practices are really bad for soil health. And if they continue to do this, it's just going to go down this really, really bad path, and their bottom line will be impacted. So therefore they will then realize there's an incentive to be more sustainable, or do regenerative agriculture or whatever. Is that something that is that how you kind of look at it too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is both true, and that has been the case for a very, very long time. And it has not stimulated the sort of like long-term solution decision making that we need. Humans have shown over and over an incredible ability to pass the bag to our descendants, or to pass the bag contemporarily to people that live in other parts of today's world, right? I grew up in a pretty white, wealthy suburb in New Jersey. I didn't have any trash problems because somebody came and took the trash. I never thought, like, where does the trash go, right? Like, trash goes someplace. So everything you just said is true. And because in our example, General Mills is at the end, relatively speaking, of a multi stakeholder chain of oats, simply because General Mills agrees with the theory that soil health is the foundation of its whole business, doesn't mean it's willing to make a change in its approach today, right?
Okay.
A sourcing specialist at General Mills could understandably respond to me, "Hey, cool story, Chris, but like, to be clear, like, am I wrecked 2 years from now or 15 years from now?" And of course, my answer is, "Hey, I think it's closer to the 2 year end of the spectrum." But like,
I
of
see.
course, I would say that. I'm trying to sell you low carbon emission services, right? Our ability to put off to future generations and to current generations in other parts of the world is incredible. People of means will largely ask others to bear the burden of our decisions when it's in our economic interest to do so. So while I strongly agree that quote unquote climate companies that only serve a net zero goal are likely in trouble from a business model risk
Yeah.
concentration perspective, the alternative is not like obviously more easy. I've already told you that our revenue from our VCM customers is larger than our revenue from non-VCM customers. So I have no regrets for that. We actively choose to participate in soil carbon VCM efforts
Yeah.
because we know that they are a piece of the problem. But if it were as straightforward as you just described, right, my revenue ratios would be flipped, and they're not.
As you know from listening to the show by now, one of the most important things you need to build a successful climate tech company is the right team. Over and over, we hear how the right team can overcome huge challenges, but finding that team is very time intensive, especially in the current market conditions. So if you don't want to spend all of your time solving that issue, let Earth Tech Talent do it for you. We are experts at finding and attracting top talent that have both the skills and the mission alignment that your team is looking for. Yes, it does take time, but that's what we're here for. We'll find the talent and you can focus on growing your business. And one more thing, we've priced our services so that every early stage startup can afford us. We are about half the price of traditional search firms while still maintaining that white glove service. Plus, we specialize in supporting clean tech startups. This is what we've been doing since the very beginning. And given our time here, plus the podcast, we have a very, very strong network in this space. So if you are hiring, reach out to us today. Connect directly with me on LinkedIn if you feel like it, or go to earthtechtalent.com/contact. That's earth, ERTH, techtalent.com/contact. All right, back to the show. Yeah. So how do you, I mean, if you, I'm sure you've thought about this, how do you think that we're going to be able to get people or to get these bigger companies to see the direct correlation and start actually making a change? Like, I don't know if this is how the VCM piece comes into the picture, or like how do we actually get a change to be made in the actual management process to improve soil health?
Yeah. So I don't know which of these options is going to hit, but I see a few different things that could be part of like the total momentum accumulating. One is the VCM itself. Like, corporate net zero goals are not bad. They are, in general, very, very good. My theory is that in the agricultural sector, companies that have a high quality net zero goal and pursue it through their agricultural supply chains rather than through carbon credit mechanisms that are unrelated to their supply chain will be spending money today for the net zero benefits and will very quickly realize, oh wow, hey, I've got a more resilient supply chain. That's the sort of thing that I can sell to my operations department, right, rather than my sustainability marketing department. And anybody that works in the sustainability net zero office, so to speak, of a big corporation knows that what they want to do is they want to identify solutions that serve the core business rather than just, quote unquote, only this VCM goal. So that's option number one. Option number two is there are specific types of crops that are more vulnerable and that will experience disruption sooner. There's a really beautiful analysis of this, and I can find it and we can link to it in the show notes if you like. But if you imagine the x-axis is number of acres from small to large, and then the y-axis goes both negative and positive. The y-axis describes how will a given crop be affected by climate change. Climate change is complex. It's not a singular thing. Nonetheless, like in aggregate over the coming decades, what will be the influence? Some crops will actually be helped. So there is a positive axis to the y dimension. And that's because, for example, maybe you're taking a crop that right now is only growable in a small part of the world, but as average temperatures rise, maybe actually effective acreage could increase for that crop, right? And then the size of each bubble is the market size for each of these crops. I forget the numbers, but it's something like, 70% of our calories come from 15 crops. There's unbelievable concentration, rice, wheat, soy, sorghum, et cetera, the basics. And what you see is most of the dots are below the line. That means in aggregate, the yield of our land over the coming decades will harm productivity. There will be fewer tons, fewer bushels, fewer snacks, of the major commodities. Overall productivity of agricultural land and therefore revenue from the production of that land will go down.
For people who is like, oh, climate change is good for some people. Like there's some people trying to point out the positives, like, me in northern Wisconsin here.
Yep.
We can get a longer season,
Mild
maybe,
winters.
but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, at the overall aggregate, it's going to negatively impact the large concentration. So I appreciate you pointing that out. You can continue. I just want to make sure I highlighted that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really important to acknowledge. Like, I think if climate storytellers don't tell nuanced stories, we're going to get caught up in some of those exceptions, right? And people in, I don't know, northern Wisconsin probably want milder winters every now and then. It may
For
hurt
the most part, yeah.
I don't know, ice skating industry, but yeah, right? Like net revenue will go up because more people want to be on nice lakes in northern Wisconsin.
Snowmobile sales are definitely
go down from your loss.
Yeah,
exactly.
Snowmobile sales are going down.
Yeah, snowmobile lobby is upset. Pontoon boat lobby is excited. In aggregate, yes, this is really important that overall productivity will go down.
Yeah.
And therefore, kind of solution number 2, back to your actual question, is which of these crops will get nailed sooner, harder, faster? And as things are compromised, what will we attribute the problem to? So again, we can link to this in the show notes, but there was a both tragic and fascinating moment. I think this was spring 24, maybe spring 23. There was a big car accident in a major, it was one of the I states, I think it was Iowa. There was a big car accident because there was what many newspapers called like a dust storm. And a lot of agronomists and land managers, farmers in the area were like, this isn't a dust storm. This is people who have destroyed the health of their soils, and they're losing those soils in the wind because healthier soils are more likely to stick around, right? They're more moist, a whole bunch of reasons why they're more likely to stick around. So it was interesting because, and people died, it was a serious car accident. It was like really tragic. Dozens of cars involved, half dozen people died. And it was this really interesting moment where many people were like, what is the story we're telling here? Oh, dust storm, what the heck is a dust storm? How can you possibly prevent that? Versus over tillage of these soils is actually what caused it here. And again, I can link to it, but some really interesting like geospatial statistics on what are the rates of tillage. Tillage is the farmer word for plowing. I'm from New Jersey. There is a lot of farming in New Jersey. I'm not from that part of New Jersey. Tillage is what I grew up calling plowing, which is very important agronomically, but does have some deleterious effects of decreasing moisture, et cetera. So anyway, long story short, what's that story we tell, right? When cocoa collapses, do we say that it's because of, political instability in Côte d'Ivoire, therefore they couldn't deploy, good agronomy? Do we blame it on like, well, there are these random diseases that just happen, Or I think in some cases, are we going to rightly acknowledge that it is our way of managing soils that have decreased soil health, and therefore like Mars, Hershey's, Nestle's of the world are like, oh shit, like there's not as much cocoa this year, which means chocolate prices go up. And at the end of the day, I don't know, do we care a lot about chocolate? Maybe not, but canary in the coal mine, right? If all the chocolate in the world went away, I, in New Jersey, would be modestly affected. People in Côte d'Ivoire, people in Brazil, people in Indonesia would have millions and millions and millions of lives affected, like in very, very scary ways. So that's kind of the second thing is as crises occur, what will we attribute it to? Will we rightly attribute it to our crisis of soil health? And can, this is a long-term problem and a long-term solution, which means ultimately it's got to be at least significantly national policy decisions. Publicly traded corporations are not good at decadal scale commitments. It's just not what like capitalism is designed to incentivize. So that's really the second, I think, opportunity is to realize that these early crises are coming for soy, right? If I'm in Iowa, I'm a soy farmer. It's easy for me to
Mm,
say, "Oh, that'll never happen to me. I don't live in Cote d'Ivoire." But like, soil health is a global phenomenon. Same way we share
yeah,
an atmosphere, right? We share a lot of soil dynamics.
yeah. And then did you say there was a third option that you think to be able to solve some of this and make the change?
There is, yeah. And to be clear, this is the one that I believe the least in, but many people I really respect believe in it deeply. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge, especially because some of my customers are committed to the solution, and I honor them and I want to support them sincerely. And that's let's call like kind of the whole food solution of like there is product differentiation, which will link to real customer demand. People vote with their wallets. That I agree with generally. But the theory here is that companies can differentiate by their commitments to whatever you want to call it. And this is where we get into all the marketing nonsense of these dumbass words. But regenerative, right? Healthy soils, climate positive, blah, blah, blah. I fundamentally don't believe that consumer behavior will be a significant leveler of soil health climate impact. I would love to be wrong. Many people are totally committed to the idea that human consumer behavior can change the world like this. There are, glimmers of hope. Whole Foods is out there, right? 40 years ago, Whole Foods didn't really exist. So it's a non-zero solution in my accounting, but I treat it as the third most likely way that we're going to have global scale, simply
Hmm.
because I just don't think that those purchasing priorities of humans are as high in sort of like the stack rank as many other
Yeah.
folks do. I think we
I
want
mean,
taste and we want cheap.
yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's like there are already so many decisions that the average person, because of this the information overload in our world right now, they have to make. Like they don't want to have to be sitting there deciding, spending 20 minutes analyzing which lettuce to buy because of where it
Totally.
comes from. Like it's very impractical unless at some point, the robots are doing our shopping for us and maybe they're,
Yep.
programmed to take this into account. Great, that'd be cool. But I still think we're a little a little far away from that. So I
Yeah.
really do appreciate the perspective. I mean, I think it could be interesting to see if this kind of crunchy moms movement does have some sort of political impact, which then leads to different policy, which could help change that. But it's not going to just
Yep.
be, measure your carbon impact on the world, and suddenly things are going to change because the consumers decided. No, it's just not going to happen that way. So I definitely appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
I appreciate you
And
laying
even
those
then,
three
like,
things out.
okay, we get the robots. How are we going to program the robots? We're going to program them with our actual preferences, not our like
Yeah,
imaginary preferences. And our preferences are
exactly.
taste and cost. And if you are considering between multiple lettuces, come on, like again, I don't, I am that category, right? Like there is a like rich white mom thing in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is where I normally live. That is an important part of the total puzzle. But like, golly day, if you're comparing like which stamp on the lettuce, the one to choose, I don't know. Like that's not the
Yeah, yeah.
leverage that we need as a species.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be hard because it's very, very difficult to change something from being perceived as a commodity to that's not, like not a commodity. Like you're not going to have like this vintage of, vegetable is better than this one because it was grown, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to become wine, at least not unless the Italians get involved heavily. All right. And we're back. So, sorry for the interruption there, folks. So my next question to you is going to be, do you fundamentally think that the framing of climate solutions, kind of like from a political lens, is actually like in itself a game over, or like it's just a bad way to approach trying to solve the climate issue?
Well, back to one of the first things we talked about, like nothing is really fully good or bad, right? So in this case, for me, it's like for whom? The marketing of Yardstick as a climate impact company is unbelievably important to my employees. They are an important stakeholder, right? We have seven core values. The first one says climate impact above all else. Like a bunch of them work here significantly because they think on balance, like we walk the walk. And we ask them about that, right? Like we collect data on whether they think we walk the walk, and the world is complicated, and nonetheless, on balance, yeah, they think we really do. So for some stakeholders, it's critically important. For some stakeholders, it's anathema. I work in agriculture in America. Climate change in America is a whole thing, right? That said, I think it was fall of last year. I forget exactly when, but definitely 2024. Like farmers drove their tractors to many of the major capitals of European countries because they were upset on, to oversimplify, like how climate policy and tax policy and land policy were influencing them. So, as an American, it's easy to have this simplified view of the world, which is like American farmers are like dumb and racist and they don't believe in climate change and the rest of the world is God. And it's like, no, like no one's that simple. Farmers in America are not one constituency, right? Like anyone who has spent time in agriculture in America knows that they are as diverse a group of people as any that's that large. So all those caveats acknowledged, I don't think that many people's behavior, which is ultimately what we're trying to affect, is significantly influenced with averting climate catastrophe as a like top three priority, right? The point I just made about food buying preferences, I think holds for many of our behaviors. I am probably like top 2 percentile of Americans who are informed about the topic. And like, I eat a shit ton of beef and I love eating beef. I love it. It tastes good. And you know what? I got 4 little kids and like, I just got to get them to eat like whatever the fuck I can get them to eat. And if it's a beef meatball, I am going to feed them a beef meatball. Because
Mhm.
at that moment, like, you know, CO2e per gram of protein is just like not how I'm making decisions. So, my commitment to orienting my life towards the flourishing of all people on Earth, which includes acknowledging catastrophic outcomes of climate change, is a real thing. Me feeding my kids beef meatballs does not invalidate my sincere beliefs that this is something worth devoting at least like a good chunk of my professional life to. And yeah, rubber hits the road. I'm like, here, like, golly damn it, McDonald's, just like eat a cheeseburger and like, please stop screaming at me.
Yeah. One thing I just want to interject there is like you brought up this example of the dust storm, right, in Iowa.
Yeah.
Before it's like, okay, if the news had pitched this as a like a climate thing because of, soil carbon issues. Maybe if they had talked about soil carbon issues, that'd be, or just bad soil, that could work. But depending on
Mm-hmm.
how it's pitched, it's just going to come across as, oh, this is partisan in nature because now
Yeah.
for some reason climate has become partisan, and as a
Yeah.
result, people will just ignore it. But if you
Totally.
can bring it in terms of
Yes.
like the disaster to their families, to their
Yep.
businesses, to
Yep.
their areas, that is different. And I think that this is the
Yes.
dilemma that we face, is that the people who are really informed about climate want to talk about this is the reason. They want to connect everything. And I'm not saying it's not connected, but you have to keep in mind that people who live, like, I think, like, I wouldn't say I grew up in this situation, but I lived in New York City and I understood where people came from. Their view of the world is that certain things are of the utmost importance
Yep.
because they have this very privileged position that they're coming from. But people in the
Yep.
rural areas, that's not how they think because they don't see the same problems. They're like, hey, how can I, not get all my taxes, get taxed so much, or and how can I keep the food on the table? Because it's not the same as living in New Jersey or New York City, right? So I think this is a huge issue with the messaging piece. I appreciate you
Strongly
sharing
agree.
that.
Yep. Yep. And now to be clear, like, you know, Yardstick started in like late 2000 and then into 21, 22, when like, perfect example of this is carbon removal. Carbon removal was hot vocab for a lot of early stage venture investors in 21 and 22. Investors are one of my constituencies as well, right? They're a key
Yeah.
stakeholder. So things that were attractive in one season become unattractive in another. That's the fun of marketing, right? That's just like the fun of storytelling for me. And I think that shows up really acutely in agriculture because of the often oversimplified but nonetheless directionally true thing that like agricultural producers in America like have on average a more quote unquote conservative orientation, have understandably struggled to get enthusiasm for this like abstract global geochemistry concentration problem, and instead are like, yeah, but you know, land is how I feed my family, and I'm not going to touch the way I manage land if it would put my business at risk at all. To be clear, that's also where I see part of the
Yeah.
opportunity. So our primary scientific collaborator is an organization called the Soil Health Institute. And they joke with us all the time that like they're not called the Soil Carbon Institute for a reason. They have done a lot of amazing research that shows that soil health advancing practices, which on balance either preserve or restore soil organic carbon stocks, reduce emissions and increase profitability. So it's sort of like, which one do you want? Grab that one, like follow that, right? That's what's cool about a lot of solutions in agriculture is that many of the things that reduce emissions, restore and protect soil organic carbon stocks, also reduce our reliance on synthetic, I don't like the word synthetic, but whatever, we got to choose a word, synthetic, back to Haber, right? Here we are back to Haber.
Yeah.
Do you want to spend a lot of money on fertilizer or do you want to have healthier soil? Duh, you want the latter. So SHI's work is a very strongly evidence-based approach to saying we don't even ever need to talk about emissions. If we solve for soil health, there's a very good chance that we will simultaneously solve for the thing that land managers care most about, yield, productivity, revenue, gross margin per acre, and we'll solve for emissions. And that's what's cool. That's what's really cool to me about soil.
So my question then is, how do you, I mean, this kind of goes into the regenerative agriculture topic in general, is like, how do you walk the line of still having mass production while improving soil health? Because I personally am a big fan of the idea of regenerative agriculture because, like I said, both my parents grew up as farmers, and I think industrial farming tends to it also wipes out the small farmers, which is a whole other topic. But how do we kind of walk this line of improving the health while still having the production?
Yeah, that's the whole thing, and I don't have a simple answer. Turns out there is not a simple answer. That's why we're not all doing it. But I will share some, like, at least vocab that I find helpful. One is the premise of intensification. So-called industrial agriculture of the last 100 years has messed up a lot of things, and it has made a lot of things like way, 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 way better, right? Namely, calories per acre. When you concentrate a shit ton more calories on an acre, the effective climate impact per calorie on average actually goes down. So when you compare, if you took a photo, and I think some of this can often play in like classist racist tropes, but like imagine the original farmers on the savannah, these indigenous tribes in Africa doing it this traditional way. Oftentimes that's marketed as attractive because it's so quote unquote natural. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, a lot of those production systems are incredibly emissions intensive per calorie because they don't enjoy the benefits of a lot of the technology we've developed. So a lot of the like back to the land folks often benefit from the simplistic story of like, we just got to get back to where we were, right? Before. They never really say like what before. They never really talk about like how many of your kids survived to the age of 10 before,
It's
right?
just always an idealistic version of the past.
Yeah,
right? This is
back before. And I mean, and to be clear, this cuts both ways politically. Like you have many very quote unquote progressive folks who are like, we got to get back to the way indigenous people have been doing it, right? Like indigenous people invented all of these practices. A lot of that may be well and true. And intensification of agriculture of the last 1,500 years has been a miracle in terms of concentrating more food in less land. And that is really, really important as our population continues to grow. So I am of the belief that like the farmer's market will not save us. The definition of regenerative agriculture is elusive. Rarely does someone define it enough such that I could specifically agree or disagree with it. Instead, I think what I would say is we need solutions that simultaneously increase intensification, increase calories per acre, increase nutritional content per acre, right? Because calories are not the only thing that we operate on.
Yeah.
Back to solution number 3 that I'm suspicious of. I always got to talk about my dear friend, Eric Smith, who runs a company called Audacious that's measuring nutrient density, right? This is his whole thing is like, it's not only calories, right? You can have a ton of calories and they're very low quality calories because they lack all these other important things that fuel our bodies. Nonetheless, I think you would agree with me, an agricultural transformation that reduces calories per acre is just not workable.
Yeah.
Because there's no empty land left. Like land that I perceive as empty because I grew up in New Jersey. Like people that live in that part of Arizona, they don't think it's empty at all. right? And so filling it with the thing that I want it filled with is like not necessarily attractive to them because it has other value besides calories, right? That's where I think this like engineering brain is both a really important part of the total land use economics puzzle and can really be derivative.
Yeah.
So I don't have an easy solution. Nonetheless, I think what I want to inspire people towards is a set of requirements, as hard as it is, that says we absolutely must increase intensification, not decrease it, and we absolutely must identify management practices that deliver those additional calories with lowered emissions.
Yeah. I really think that that's a helpful framework because if you can say, hey, these core things like this, I guess you'd say this way of looking at each acre, that can then give people their own opinions or their own ability to just figure out how can we increase these and decrease these. Yes, it's metrics, and there's obviously never perfect metrics, but it gives you a sort of idea on how you can go about that. And maybe there'll be, I'm sure, I'm not saying maybe there will be other solutions out there that will work on that. So
Totally.
that's good.
And that's also why I think within the agriculture kind of climate regen community, as if that's even one thing, there's a lot of folks that are really violently against, for example, like, CEA, controlled environment agriculture, like indoor agriculture. And it's like, I don't know, like all of these solutions have pros and cons, right? Like they laugh at CEA because you're neglecting the free energy of the sun. It's like, yeah, they do the same thing with all proteins, right? Like we've got all the protein we need right here in it's not the cow, it's the how. And it's like, it is the how. It's also the cow, my guy. Like we just can't afford these reductive, simplistic solutions that say, I reject anything that's hydroponic lettuce because God gave us land for a reason. Nor can the alt protein people say, we got to stop selling beef, Like it's not how human behavior works. And so my enthusiasm, we don't touch CEA, right? There doesn't tend to be much soil in CEA, so there's no soil carbon to measure. Even as it has nothing to do with Yardstick's world, I'm like, hell yeah, we need all of these solutions because we're trying to blend this pretty wicked set of requirements. And I don't see anything out there that has like got that set of requirements nailed in one embodiment.
Yeah. And one thing just also to ask about and back up a little bit is you had said that it tends to be that the carbon, I forget exactly the word you used, the carbon per acre, carbon per calorie is higher in regenerative agriculture methodologies. What's the main driver for that?
I didn't quite say that, and that's because regenerative agriculture is not one thing, right? So no one
Okay.
no one has like written that piece of literature. Usually, what I'm comparing there is more intensive and less intensive production systems, which are
Okay.
usually contrasting higher income countries and lower income countries. So again, this gets like real racist real quick and xenophobic real quick, which is why I don't like this framing. But nonetheless, a common example will be like, let's look at beef in America from beef in Kenya, right? Or like beef in Australia compared to beef in India. I mean, maybe not a lot of beef coming from India. I'm sure
Oh,
there's
so
some.
you're
There's a
so
lot of
they're
people in
so
India.
you're saying that they're typically measuring it based off of the region's kind of carbon production, not necessarily like the actual production aspect of it or how it's produced. It just happens to be like, hey, Kenya doesn't have as many emissions as America.
The way it's produced is highly correlated with where it is produced. If you go to a lower income country, the likelihood that they are drawing on the same technologies that the Midwest United States
Yeah.
is
Okay. I
drawing
see.
on is limited, right? And so Brazil
I
is
see.
maybe a middle example where they are an incredibly sophisticated agricultural economy, and nonetheless, right, they're somewhere between Morocco and America in terms of their adoption of these technologies.
Yeah.
And since management, the way we work land, and place are so highly correlated, many of the studies that I'm referring to are typically looking at this at a national level. They'll compare,
Mm, okay.
CO2e per ton of beef from America to Kenya. They're not doing it one farm to another because it's
I see.
rarely measured that precisely. And that's where
I see.
intensification is usually the jargon. Higher income countries, again, these are like broad strokes. All the like agricultural economists and development economists on your podcast are like screaming at me right now, but sorry, like you're not in my headphones, I can't hear you. Um, that's why it's often done at this level of like intensified agriculture has lots of problems. Nonetheless, in terms of like emissions per unit of food, it tends to be a banger, it tends to be really, really good.
I see.
That's why we're doing it.
I
That's why
see.
we're doing it.
Yeah. So one thing I'm always curious about with companies in your kind of like this, I would say somewhat of a niche space, like what are the
Oh
biggest
yeah, we're a niche.
factors?
Don't worry. You can call me a niche. This is market creation. I wish we were
uh,
not a niche.
exactly. What are the biggest macro factors that affect the market and affect like the growth of your customer base or the growth of your business? Like what are the biggest players in the space and the biggest things that really move the needle or pull the lever?
Yep. Yep. So one is that timeline question that I mentioned a little while ago. If I'm right that mega crises in supply chain are coming on the 2-year timeline, that will be bad for today's humans, but will be very good for the desire to adopt new technologies, right? If all the homes burn down in LA, all of a sudden we're going to get serious about fire suppression, fire risk, etc. That's just like how humans act. So that's number one. I could be wrong, right? This could be a 20-year problem and not a 2-year problem. I don't really know at the end of the day. It's the future. Who the hell knows the future? On balance, I think it's more on the 2 end of the spectrum than the 20 end of the spectrum, but that's number one. It's like how quickly will it get way, way worse in places where there is money and desire, willingness to change, et cetera. Number two, which doesn't change very quickly at all, is like what are the buying preferences of humans? This is back to why I think like solution number three is challenging to imagine, is because like what people want just does not change quickly. A big part of why agriculture is so emissive is because as people's income goes up, they largely want more protein, and they want that protein coming from beef. The only way to get more beef is to cut down more forests. It's like kind of that simple. If you could actually, make a fake burger that tastes as good as a real one, yeah, like you could probably get people to buy it more. So far, not even close. I love some of those products. Still, I'm feeding my kids beef meatballs because it's what they'll put down. So that's number two. Unbelievably important, but humbly, I submit that it is very slow to change. And then three is the way other geopolitical macro factors influence agricultural supply chains. So, for example, fertilizer, back to our boy Haber, his third appearance on the pod. Fertilizer is largely manufactured with natural gas. Natural gas only comes from certain parts of the world. Hypothetically, if those parts of the world are at war, you will have a cost problem with fertilizer. So again, oversimplification, but the war between Russia and Ukraine significantly increased fertilizer prices, and that cuts into the profits of agricultural producers.
Yeah.
When you have higher fertilizer prices, producers who believe that they have invested in soil health will be wagging their finger at their neighbors saying, ha ha, you're more exposed to those increases. Water has the exact same dynamic. Weather is incredibly unpredictable. Unlike consumer preferences, weather can change in ways completely discordant with our models of weather. At least 2-3 times a year, there is a drought somewhere or a extreme water event, a flood, a heavy rain somewhere. And then all the regen ag people are like, ha, 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 my farm is fine in the drought because look how efficiently I use water. Or there was a flood, flooding, and they said, ha, 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 I'm fine. My soils absorbed that flood rather than the runoff, clearing the fertilizer and seed that I've planted. So that third category of like geopolitical instability influencing agricultural inputs, and then the fourth category of extreme weather influencing how people perceive soil health as being strategic or not.
Yeah,
Those are the
sense.
things that I think are really influencing our agricultural system at the highest level.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And so we're running out of time here, but I'll wrap up with a couple things here. What is, when you have this situation where you have two kind of customers primarily, and they're in relatively different mentalities or kind of buckets.
Different goals.
How do you go about messaging your company? Do you just try to focus on the company, the customers that are the largest revenue share for you? Because I know there's a lot of companies in climate who, especially as they shift their messaging with the Trump administration being very anti-climate, in the rhetoric, a lot of people are like, hey, maybe we'll focus on like a defense related thing, and then we'll have the climate solution as well. Like, how do you guys go about that? And what is maybe your, I guess you could say, advice to others on how to go about this public messaging? Not for the hiring pieces, right? But for the public messaging.
Yep, totally. So the difference between soil carbon and soil health is a lot more reasonable than a lot of the other messaging pivots that a lot of other startups have considered. I don't think many people at Yardstick would keep working here if there were a defense application. I don't think I'd want to run the company myself either. Some founders are excited by that pivot because of how they feel about armed forces, whatever. Like, I have infinite respect for the people of our armed forces and largely have like low confidence in the system of our armed forces right now. And so I would probably, if that were the pivot facing Yardstick, I would probably tell the board that they should find a different CEO because that's not me. Um, and I don't know the politics of many of my employees, but I think a good chunk of them would be like, climate impact above all else. It's not, literally
Yeah.
number one. Like, what the
Yeah.
hell?
Yeah.
And I'd go through the whole song and dance about like flexibility and tough times. And I don't know. I just don't think it would work. A perfect example of this is Tina Smith is a senator, congressperson. I forget. That's embarrassing. From Minnesota. And then a guy named Young from Indiana. Again, senator, congressperson. I can't remember. They have co-sponsored a bill for years now, and it used to be called blah 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 soil carbon, and now it's called blah 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 soil health. Carbon 180 has supported both versions of that bill, right? Like the content is the same.
Yeah.
The acronym went from Arachi SC soil carbon to Arasha soil health. I made my peace with that. Like I don't know. I think there's the flip side of the like I wouldn't want to run a defense company coin is like flexibility is everything. Thankfully in this case, the distance between soil carbon and soil health is actually quite small from a scientific perspective, which means I can feel integrous
Hmm.
describing my company as measuring soil health, and I can describe why soil health is really important. The Biden
Hmm.
administration didn't do a ton to support the voluntary carbon marketplace, so I think practically, commercially for Yardstick, there's not a lot of support that Trump can take
Hmm.
away from it's voluntary in the first place.
Yeah.
Republicans love
Yeah.
voluntary, right? Like it's all carrots, and even then, they're pretty small carrots, right? There's not many sticks. So I think the way I think about it, and the way I encourage other founders to think about it, is um, identify the application of your technology that helps someone make money or save money. That is what all businesses do. You either help someone increase revenue or decrease cost. Full stop. For us, that shows up in both places, right? People make money in the voluntary carbon marketplace. 4 or 5 years ago, many of our customers in the VCM were going vertical. Okay, great. That's where we're going to start. I've like self-compassion on our desire to focus on that piece of the segment, especially because I was starting the company. I don't have an agricultural background. Like, what the hell do I know about General Mills and oats, right? What the hell do I know about soil science? I've learned all of this on the job. That cuts both ways. I think I've led Yardstick in some valuable, interesting, unique ways because of that. But that means I have mercy on myself for focusing on that noisy piece of the market, the VCM, which is nonetheless volatile. And the way I advise, mentees, and I do executive coaching too on the side. So folks that I coach is like, what is going to be more durable? Make money, save money. I don't think that Yardstick is so over rotated on the VCM that like, oh my gosh, woulda, shoulda, coulda, we left this bigger opportunity on the table because of that. Hey, is it a 2-year problem or a 20-year problem rebuttal? The General Mills of the world, even though we're proud that we have them as customers, they're not like, here's $100 million Yardstick, like go to the moon.
Yeah.
It's still tough. It's still emergent. But that's the most fundamental thing is like, for your customers, who are at the end of the day the folks that are helping you figure out whether you've got product market fit or not, very few of them are strictly economically motivated
Yeah.
by the climate math. They're motivated by
Yeah.
something else. What's their existing business? General Mills sells oats. Follow that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think if in your case, the thing I would just draw out for people to listen to is that you found the kind of messaging that fits between them that is obvious to both customers, right? Carbon
Yes.
soil or soil health management, effectively. Like
Yep.
it doesn't really matter. Right? You can kind of change one word out for the sales pitch
Yep.
to one customer versus the other, and you've got a nice
Totally.
thing there. I'm sure that even if it is like a wider spectrum for other founders, there's going to be something where it's towards the middle there if you really need to walk the line. But I do appreciate this because I think again we're seeing I don't know, there's definitely some growing pains like obviously in the industry, but my general take is that even with all the negative stuff happening for the climate industry, if you will, their climate verticals, that it'll actually be healthy in the long term because
Yes.
it'll force
Totally.
people to make better business models,
Yeah,
and
the
we will
tide
see
goes
way
out. And
more
then you're
impact.
like,
Yeah,
oh, you don't have a bathing suit. That's
exactly,
embarrassing. And like,
exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
saying that in the mirror, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not talking shit at any other founder. Like, maybe that's us, right? Maybe the tide is going out on Yardstick as I speak. That's the nature of these systems. Like these markets all have cycles. To me, even as there are, of course, many things for my personal politics to be deeply concerned about in the new Trump administration, from a like, oh, the climate sector's durability, I'm like, I don't know. It's discipline, right? Is your product
Yeah.
cheaper? Is it better? No? Then what the
Yeah.
hell are you doing here?
Exactly. Exactly. Awesome. Well, let's wrap things up. Any announcements or any kind of calls to actions or last thoughts you'd offer people?
We are always looking for more customers. So if you're measuring soil carbon, you work in agricultural supply chains, we would love to hear from you. We'll be doing our first work in Europe this fall, which is really exciting. We've measured soil carbon previously in Australia and Mexico, so we've got a good amount of international experience. Europe is its own whole beast of like climate and non-climate incentives, so we're really excited to be signing our first deals there. Um, yeah, use
Yeah.
yardstick.com. We'd love to hear from folks that are interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm very sad we didn't have time to talk about the Europe topic, but we'll have to have you on again. There's a lot of other questions I'd love to ask you, especially around hiring. I had a bunch of nice quips planned for it, but we ran out of time. But anyways, thanks so much for coming on, Chris. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it on social media and drop us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform. Everybody says this, but it's actually very, very important because it helps us to rank up against those big guys who got tons of marketing budget. But if you're a big fan of the show, give us those 5 stars. Share us on social media. Tell your friends about it, especially if you think there's anything that you disagree with or you want to get their take on it. Share it around. And if you're feeling extra generous, do give us a subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to get to that 1,000 subscribers mark. And we do love any feedback. So if you like the episode, want to discuss any particular aspects of it, drop a comment either on a LinkedIn post or on the Substack. And if there's anything that you want to provide as feedback, maybe on the negative side, maybe reach out to Soulmail or myself directly on LinkedIn with, hey, I think you should really improve this or whatever. We always love to hear it because we're always trying to make the show better. Thank you so much for being a loyal listener, and we'll see you next time on Clean Techies.